right, welcome back everyone. My name is Mr. Sobieski, your instructor for American History 1. I just want to start off by saying we are off to a wonderful start. Discussion boards are looking good. Y'all are absolutely hitting what I'm looking for, and I'm looking forward to reading your essays coming in here. So let's go ahead and dive into the content for Unit 1. We're looking at exploration and colonization. So let's start off by looking at a timeline here. I'm not going to cover every single point on here, but I just want to highlight some of the key things that we have going on. First, we can see on the far left, we have humans cross that land bridge between Asia and North America, and we're looking at about 1300 to 7000 BCE. Another name for this land bridge is called Beringia. And geographically, we're talking about present-day Alaska going up into Russia. This is the area where we believe that humans first crossed over into the Americas. Another key point that we have here is looking at the year 1000. We have Leif Erikson, who arrives in present-day Canada. We believe this is like the really first, European exploration in the Americas, but it was really just an exploration, like an expedition that was going on. They didn't stay and establish long-term colonies. It was more just kind of a scouting mission and return home. Then as we move to the far right on this timeline, we can see that Columbus arrives in the Bahamas in 1492. And I'm sure most of us remember that phrase that's been burned into our head. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And that phrase is so good because it helps us to orientate ourselves in history, meaning that that's a great reference point. If you were to look at like any other date, we can look at 1346. And then if you go back to that phrase, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, you can mentally go, okay, 1346, we're talking about before Columbus. And historians will refer to that time period before 1492 as the pre-Columbian period. Of course, meaning before Christopher Columbus and his interaction in the Americas. Next, let's go ahead and look at some major cultural centers in Mesoamerica and South America. First, we're going to look at the Incan civilization, which is located west of the Andes Mountains, and they're located in present-day Peru. Then as we move up north, looking at the Maya, represented by pink on this map, they are at the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, stretching out into the Gulf of Mexico, we can see there. Next, in green, we can see we have the Aztec civilization. That's located primarily in Mexico, with their base being in Mexico City. And it's a little difficult to see on the map here, but we have the Olmec civilization represented in orange. And they were a smaller civilization. They're going to be occupying that area kind of in between the Aztec and the Maya, and they existed before both of those major civilizations. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into Incan culture. So what we're looking at here is a picture of Machu Picchu, which is a ceremonial Incan city. It's built around 1450, and we can go back to that mantra that we had for Columbus. So 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. We're looking at 1450 right here. So, okay, this is about 42 years before Columbus arrived to the Americas. And an interesting aspect of their culture here, you can see that obviously we got high elevation that they're establishing their city here, and they used a lot of terracing, meaning they're cutting into the earth, they're creating these flat levels that enables them to build cities, to farm at different elevations, and it's much easier to navigate. Another interesting fact about the Inca is that they had no written language that we know of. Instead, what they did is they communicated and recorded history and information by using this thing called a kuipu. So we have a string or a rope, and coming off of that you have different links, and knots are placed at different heights. And this is their way of communicating. This is their way of recording history. This is their way of recording debts, recording money owed. And when we're looking at history, I always think it's important to bring this up. It's not who did it best. It's discovering how different societies operated and what we can learn from them. Sometimes things that may come across as seeming primitive can actually be more effective than what we have today. So I love diving into some of the interesting facts about them. Next, let's go ahead and move up north towards the Aztecs. Specifically, I want to focus on this island city known as Tenochtitlan. And this city is absolutely amazing. Historians have described this city as like the Venice of Mesoamerica. And what I mean by that is it had such an elaborate canal system and irrigation system that, it rivaled Venice of Europe. The other interesting fact here, or legend for this location for the Aztecs, is they had a vision about where they should settle the city. And it goes that they should found the city wherever they see an eagle resting on a cactus. And if you're familiar with the Mexican flag, that's what they actually have represented on their flag, is you have an eagle sitting on a cactus. So that goes back to the Aztecs legend and tradition for that. Next, let's move on to another timeline here. So now we're starting. We have Christopher Columbus in 1492, and shortly after that, we have 1494. We're looking at the Treaty of Tordesillas. This is important because it really divides America between the Portuguese and the Spanish. And if you can imagine a line drawn just on the west side of modern day Brazil, that's where the Treaty of Tordesillas lays geographically. So everything east of that line is going towards the Portuguese. They're laying claim to that. And everything west of that line, just west of Brazil, the Spanish are laying claim to. And of course, we have to remember that you have native people who are living in this area. This is the age of exploration and conquering that's going on. So they're literally just wargaming. They're looking at a map of this new world that the Europeans are discovering, and they're trying to figure out what areas are they going to try to conquer, right? For God, for glory, and all that stuff that that they lay claim to. So next, we can go ahead and move down this timeline, and what I really want to highlight is the first failed attempt at colonization for the English. So we're looking at 1584, and we're talking about the Roanoke expedition. And this is right in our backyard, right here in North Carolina. So this is America's first murder mystery, trying to figure out what happened to this first group of English explorers. So they set up a small base, a small camp. It's in Roanoke on the coast of North Carolina, and they leave a few people there. And then you have some people who go back to England, and they get supplies. They come back a few years later, and then boom, everybody's gone. What happened to those settlers? We just don't know. It's still a mystery to this day. We have some clues, we have some ideas. There's been some carving on a tree with the letters CRO, and we believe that maybe that was a signal that they integrated into the Croatoan tribe, which lived in that area. There's also been rumors too that maybe they even integrated into the Lumbee tribe, which had extension all the way up to the coast. It's really up for you guys going down that rabbit hole of history, see what you guys come up with. It's an interesting topic. But then as we move on, the English established their first permanent colony in Jamestown in 1607. And the reason why we're saying it's the first permanent colonization or first permanent settlement from the English is because they tried at Roanoke. They just were unsuccessful. All right, moving on to the next diagram we have. Now we're looking at the Columbian Exchange. And the Columbian Exchange is focused on three main things. We're talking about food, animals, and diseases. And now that we have this exchange that's been opened up in 1492, and by the way, it's called the Columbian Exchange in reference to Christopher Columbus, if that's not clear. So now that we have this interaction going on between, quote, the old world, Europe, and the new world, the Americas, we have food, animals, and diseases that have existed in these geographic locations alone for a long, long time. And now that you have travel going back and forth between, quote, the old world and the new world, these food, animals, and diseases are now going to completely new locations. So, good, bad, and ugly. That's exactly what's going on for the Columbian Exchange. There's wonderful things that's going on. You have brand new food that's going to help populations thrive. From the Americas, you have things like potatoes, squash, pepper, things like that that are going to Europe, and those are foundational crops that are going to help society, especially for potatoes. Those are a great staple for Europe. The other thing that's kind of interesting, I don't have it on this diagram here, but tomatoes. Tomatoes are unique to the Americas. So when I think of Italian food, specifically I'm thinking of pasta, I'm thinking of some wonderful tomato sauce that goes along with it. Prior to the Columbian Exchange, there were no tomatoes in Europe. That's a uniquely American fruit or vegetable, whatever tomato is. So now that's going to be in Europe. So it's wonderful. You're opening up new food, new flavors, and stuff like that. But of course, there's some bad. And the bad we're talking about is disease. Specifically, we have smallpox coming from Europe. And this smallpox is absolutely devastating to the native population. I've read some statistics from historians who are talking about like a 90% kill rate. It's hard to get these accurate numbers about how many people actually perished from it. I think that's a solid estimate though. You're talking about 90% of the locals being absolutely just, slaughtered from smallpox coming over. And if you're really interested in this topic of the Columbian Exchange, there's a wonderful book I can recommend. It's called Guns, Germs, and Steel. And this is by Jared Diamond. And he really explores this topic of the Columbian Exchange and breaks it down in such a great way. And, spoiler alert, that's the answer of how he says that the Europeans were able to be so successful in conquering a lot of the Americas and a lot of the world is through guns, germs, and steel. And they believe that a lot of these different diseases that were acquired by Europeans is because they were living in close proximity with animals. You have cattle, you have horses, you have pigs. These animals get diseases sometimes, and those diseases can jump to people. Depending on what you believe for coronavirus, for COVID-19, that kind of seems like it might be a trend too. Maybe going from bats to people, but who knows? I think we're still kind of going down the rabbit hole trying to figure out what exactly is going on for COVID right now. So that's the Columbian Exchange. All right, so that concludes my first lecture video. I just want to remind everyone here that, this is not an exhaustive lecture for content. This is just laying down a foundation and highlighting some key themes that I think are important for American history for us developing. So also a reminder to read the following chapters and view the PowerPoints in the module. We have Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3, and Chapter 4. All of this is posted in the module in Moodle. So use these chapters in PowerPoint to study for your quiz, which is due on Sunday. Keep up the great work, everyone.